What happens when love and sacrifice collide? The truth will shock you. You won't see this coming. In this touching video, we dive deep into the powerful theme of love and sacrifice. This story shows us how love can make us go to extraordinary lengths for those we care about, even when it means sacrificing our own desires. Join us as we explore a tale of heartwarming devotion, loss, and the true meaning of love and sacrifice. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories TH for more heart-touching stories. The unexpected encounter. Lily Morgan was a young woman working as a barista at a small neighborhood cafe. Her life was far from glamorous, marked by constant struggle and determination. She worked tirelessly to stay afloat after her family had fallen into financial ruin. Once well off, her family now grappled with debt and the loss of their business, a beloved family restaurant that had been their pride. Lily took on this responsibility with the hope of supporting them, but the weight of it was heavy, and she often felt the loneliness of it all. Despite the difficulties, she remained resilient, determined to make her way in the world without leaning on others. One typical afternoon, as Lily served coffee to the regulars, her life took an unexpected turn. As she carried a tray of hot coffee through the bustling cafe, she suddenly collided with someone. Cups rattled, the tray nearly slipped from her hands, and before she could even apologize, the coffee splashed. For a moment, everything stopped. The man she had bumped into was none other than Matthew Carter, a venture capitalist whose name was known across the city. He was tall, sharply dressed in a tailored suit, with an air of wealth and sophistication that immediately stood out in contrast to the everyday crowd. At first, Lily didn't recognize him. She had no idea who he was, and in that split second, all she could focus on was how embarrassed she felt for spilling coffee on a complete stranger. Her heart raced, her cheeks flushed with mortification, and she stammered an apology. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to," she said, her voice faltering. Matthew's expression softened, and he chuckled lightly, clearly amused by the whole situation. "It's okay," he said with a warm smile. "I'm more surprised at how calm I am about the coffee than you are about the mess." Lily laughed nervously, still feeling awkward but relieved to see he wasn't angry. It wasn't until she looked up again that she realized who she had bumped into. "Wait a minute," she thought, eyes widening. "You're Matthew Carter." Her mind scrambled to place him. He was the founder of Carter Ventures, one of the wealthiest venture capital firms in the city. People always spoke of him with awe, and here he was, standing in front of her after a clumsy coffee accident. Suddenly, she felt an odd pull, a strange mix of awe and curiosity. There he was, a man from a completely different world than hers, and yet the instant connection between them felt undeniable. It was a moment that defied logic but intrigued her nonetheless. "Don't worry about it," Matthew reassured her. "I'm fine. You didn't burn me, so we're good." Lily nodded, still a little flustered. She tried to apologize again, but Matthew waved it off with a smile. "This is quite the introduction," he said, a playful twinkle in his eyes. Lily didn't know what to say. She wanted to make small talk, but she didn't know how to approach someone like him. He was used to a world of business meetings and luxury, while she lived in the shadows of debt and constant uncertainty. As they exchanged a few more words, the moment passed, and Matthew left the cafe. However, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, even in that brief, awkward encounter. For the first time in a long while, she felt a connection, though she wasn't sure what kind of connection it was. The next few days, Matthew seemed to appear in the cafe more often. Sometimes it was just for a cup of coffee, sometimes for a quick meeting. Each time, their brief exchanges continued, sometimes with small talk about coffee, other times about life. Lily could tell he wasn't just another wealthy businessman. There was a loneliness to him that matched her own. It was in the way his gaze lingered for a moment too long, as though he was looking for something more in the ordinary interactions of life. The more Lily saw him, the more she was drawn to him. He was far removed from her world, yet his presence made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: curiosity, a spark of interest that was hard to ignore. But it wasn't just physical attraction. There was a deeper, more emotional connection forming between them. They began to share bits of their lives with each other, his struggles with the isolation that came with his wealth, and her dreams of escaping the cycle of financial instability. They spoke about everything and nothing, and in those small moments, they both felt a sense of belonging that neither of them had expected. For Lily, Matthew became a symbol of something she hadn't realized. She was missing a connection that transcended their financial differences. She had always been taught to work hard, to struggle on her own. But in Matthew, she found someone who understood loneliness and longing just as much as she did. Matthew, for his part, was intrigued by Lily in a way he had never been with anyone else. She wasn't impressed by his wealth, nor did she seek anything from him. She was real, and in a world where people only wanted something from him, her authenticity made her stand out. As much as he tried to ignore it, he found himself looking forward to their brief moments together, drawn not just to her beauty, but to the simplicity and honesty that she embodied. What began as a clumsy encounter over spilled coffee turned into a connection neither of them could ignore. Lily Morgan, the young woman trying to make her way in the world, had unknowingly crossed paths with Matthew Carter, a man who had everything but still sought something more. Their worlds, so different at first glance, were beginning to collide in ways neither of them could predict. This was only the beginning, and for both of them, the unexpected encounter had set in motion a journey neither would have ever imagined. Gradually realizing their feelings as time went by, Lily and Matthew's interactions began to deepen, despite the obvious differences between them. The initial awkwardness that had marked their first meeting slowly faded as they shared more casual conversations and brief encounters. What began as a simple exchange of pleasantries turned into something more significant, something neither of them had expected. Lily, with her simple life and humble job as a barista, never imagined she would find herself drawn to someone like Matthew Carter. She lived in a world where financial struggles were constant, where every decision felt like a battle to survive. Despite the difficulties she faced daily, Lily had always longed for something more. A deeper connection, a sense of belonging, and most importantly, love and support. While she worked hard to maintain her independence, she often found herself feeling emotionally starved. Her days consisted of endless work at the cafe, serving customers with a smile, while her heart felt hollow from the lack of meaningful relationships. On the other hand, Matthew's life was filled with luxury and success, yet it felt hollow to him. From the outside, he had everything a person could want: money, influence, a powerful network of connections, but he lacked something far more essential: genuine human connection. Despite being surrounded by people constantly vying for his attention, Matthew felt increasingly isolated. The pressures of living in a world where everyone's expectations were high left him feeling detached from the life he had built for himself. The weight of his own wealth and status, which should have provided comfort, instead made him feel disconnected from the world around him. He was lonely in a way that no amount of success could fill, and it was this emptiness that Lily seemed to understand. Their first few encounters were brief, but meaningful. They exchanged glances and small talk over coffee, but the moments lingered in their minds long after they parted ways. Matthew was struck by how genuine Lily was, a stark contrast to the superficial relationships he often experienced. She didn't see him as a wealthy businessman, but as a person someone to talk to, share thoughts with, and not be judged by the expectations of his wealth. For Lily, Matthew was different from the others. She didn't see him as just another rich man, but as someone who was perhaps as lonely as she was. Their conversations became more frequent, often going beyond the typical pleasantries of customer and barista. They began to open up about their lives. Matthew, talking about the pressures of his career and the solitude it brought, while Lily shared her struggles of trying to hold her family together after everything had fallen apart. They were two people from completely different worlds, yet they were finding a strange, comforting connection. Lily found herself looking forward to their encounters, which grew longer with each visit. It wasn't just about the conversation. It was the way Matthew really listened to her. He didn't interrupt her or try to fix her problems. He simply understood. He shared his own struggles, too, revealing a side of him that few people ever saw. He was not the polished, confident businessman that everyone thought him to be. He was vulnerable, afraid, and uncertain at times. And that honesty, that openness began to break down the walls between them. It wasn't long before Lily realized that she had begun to feel something more for Matthew. At first, she dismissed it as an admiration for his personality, the way he seemed so different from the world she was used to. But as the days passed, she realized that it was more than that. Her attraction to him wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She was drawn to the way he understood her in a way no one else had. She realized that they both shared a kind of loneliness that only someone who had felt it themselves could truly understand. Their connection wasn't just about the external circumstances of their lives, but about something deeper, something that had started to grow between them despite their differences. For Matthew, his feelings were equally complicated. At first, he had been fascinated by Lily's simplicity, her authenticity. She wasn't impressed by his wealth or his name, something that was rare in his world. People were always either in awe of him or trying to take something from him, but Lily didn't seem interested in any of that. She treated him like a normal person, something he hadn't experienced in years. And over time, that respect for her grew into admiration, then affection. He found himself looking forward to their meetings, wondering what it would be like to have someone who didn't just want something from him. But it wasn't just about affection, it was also about the emotional connection they shared. Matthew began to realize that in Lily, he had found someone who understood his struggles. She didn't judge him for his wealth, but she also didn't treat him like a hero. She saw him for who he truly was, the man behind the business deals and the meetings, the man who longed for companionship and understanding. They both recognized that they had found something rare in each other, not just love, but an emotional bond that was hard to explain. It was a connection born from shared vulnerability, a mutual understanding of what it meant to be lonely despite being surrounded by people. As their relationship developed, it became evident that the bond they shared went beyond simple attraction. Their conversations became more personal, more intimate. They discussed their fears, their dreams, and the pain that had shaped their lives. And in those moments, they both found something that had been missing for so long, a sense of belonging. They didn't need to fix each other, nor did they need to provide answers. They just needed each other to be present. The attraction between them had slowly transformed into something more. It was no longer just about two people from different worlds finding a common ground. It was about two souls, weary from their own battles, coming together to find comfort in one another's presence. It was a love that had quietly blossomed, rooted in shared experiences and a recognition of each other's pain and longing. For both Lily and Matthew, this was the start of something that felt real, something they didn't want to run from, no matter the differences in their backgrounds. The more time they spent together, the more they realized that their connection wasn't just an escape from their own worlds, it was a chance to build something new, something that could offer them both the emotional support and fulfillment they had been searching for. And despite the challenges that lay ahead, they were ready to face them together. What had started as an accidental meeting had turned into a connection. Neither of them could ignore a connection that was slowly, but surely, changing their lives forever. This part of the story highlights the deep emotional growth and vulnerability of the characters. Their connection was not just physical attraction, but a spiritual and emotional bond that allowed them to truly understand one another. It was a relationship that transcended their differences and offered them both the possibility of healing and personal growth. Through their shared experiences, Lily and Matthew began to realize that they had more in common than they initially thought, and the connection between them became a lifeline they weren't willing to let go of. Family crisis. Lily's world shifted in an instant when she received the phone call that would alter everything. She was at the cafe, her mind preoccupied with the usual stream of orders and her constant effort to remain upbeat despite the long hours and meager pay. Her brother, Oliver, had been struggling with health issues for months, but the extent of the situation never really hit her until she learned the truth. Oliver had been diagnosed with severe kidney failure, and he urgently needed surgery, an expensive procedure that was simply beyond the family's financial reach. The phone call was brief but suffocating, the words severe kidney failure echoing in her mind long after she hung up. Her heart sank as she processed the severity of the situation. Oliver, her younger brother, the one person she had promised to protect and care for, was in dire need. The weight of her responsibility hit her like a ton of bricks, leaving her feeling powerless and lost. She had always prided herself on her independence, on being able to handle her problems on her own. But this was beyond what she could fix by herself. Her mind raced, trying to find a solution. She immediately thought of the family savings, but there was nothing substantial there. The little they had left was barely enough to cover basic living expenses, let alone an expensive surgery. They had been struggling financially for years, ever since the business had failed, and this was the breaking point. The idea of asking for help felt like failure to her. She had always been the one who took care of things, who made do with what she had. And now she was being asked to rely on others, and that was a line she had always been unwilling to cross. As she processed the enormity of the situation, Lily felt trapped between her sense of pride and the overwhelming need to help her brother. She thought about Matthew, his wealth, his influence, the seemingly endless resources he had at his disposal. For a moment, the idea of reaching out to him seemed logical. After all, he had offered to help her in the past, and there was no one else she could think of who could solve the problem so quickly. But the thought of accepting help from someone like Matthew filled her with dread. She didn't want to become someone who relied on the charity of a rich man, especially not him. The pressure of trying to keep her family afloat while maintaining her dignity weighed heavily on her. She couldn't bear the thought of exposing her vulnerability to Matthew, someone she had just started to care about in ways she hadn't anticipated. The fact that he was wealthy only complicated things. She didn't want to be the type of woman who leaned on a man for money, and she certainly didn't want to put their blossoming relationship at risk by making it about money or charity. She feared that accepting his help would forever change the dynamic between them, turning something personal into something transactional. Despite these feelings, Lily found herself alone in the cafe after her shift, staring out the window into the darkening sky. Her heart ached for Oliver, for the life he deserved, and for the burden that was now resting squarely on her shoulders. She knew she had to make a choice, either find a way to get the money on her own, or swallow her pride and ask for help. But no matter how she turned the problem over her mind, she couldn't escape the harsh reality that the money she needed was simply not there. The emotional conflict was eating her up from the inside. She felt like a failure, like someone who couldn't even save her own brother. It was a crushing feeling, one that left her feeling empty and useless. And yet, as much as she struggled with this internal battle, the thought of turning to Matthew kept resurfacing. She didn't want to involve him, didn't want to drag him into her problems, but deep down she knew that if there was any chance of saving Oliver, she would have to swallow her pride and ask for help. As the days passed, Lily found herself sinking deeper into her own sense of despair. Every time she saw Matthew at the cafe, his friendly smile and warm presence seemed like a reminder of how far apart their worlds truly were. He had everything she lacked: financial security, success, and an ease of life that seemed so foreign to her. It felt impossible to bridge the gap between them, to ask for help when she barely knew how to ask for the simplest things in her own life. But Lily's heart knew the truth. She couldn't let Oliver suffer. She couldn't let her brother's life hang in the balance because of her own pride. She had to put aside her fears and allow herself to accept the help that was offered, no matter how hard it was. She knew Matthew cared for her, but she couldn't help but feel like asking him for money would change everything between them. It would turn their connection into something based on obligation and guilt, something she didn't want to live with. And yet, in the quiet of her apartment, when the world outside seemed distant and silent, Lily realized she had no other choice. Her brother's health was deteriorating rapidly, and she was running out of time. The decision wasn't about pride anymore. It was about saving her brother's life. She could no longer afford to let her insecurities dictate her choices. She needed to tell Matthew. She needed to ask him for help. But even as she made that decision, a part of her feared that it would change everything, that it would shift the balance between them, making it impossible to return to the easy, comfortable friendship they had built. And the thought of losing Matthew, of losing what they had, was the hardest part to accept. As she picked up her phone to call him, Lily's hands trembled. This was more than just asking for money. It was about facing her own vulnerabilities, her own fears, and learning to trust someone with a part of herself she had always guarded fiercely. But as she pressed the call button, she knew that there was no turning back. She was about to open herself up in a way she never had before, and in that moment, she had to trust that whatever happened next, she would find the strength to handle it. Lily was about to take the hardest step of her life. But would it be enough to save her brother? Would Matthew even be willing to help her? Or would this moment of desperation create an insurmountable distance between them? The tension in her chest was unbearable as she waited for him to answer. Secrets from the past, as Lily and Matthew's relationship grew deeper, a revelation from Matthew's past suddenly came to light, shaking the foundation of everything they had built together. It began innocuously an offhand remark, a passing comment made by one of Matthew's colleagues, someone who didn't know how much it would affect Lily. It turned out that Matthew's family had been responsible for the bankruptcy of a small business Lily had once worked for years ago. The revelation hit her like a tidal wave, knocking her breath out and leaving her standing in stunned silence. Lily had always been proud of the work she had done at that small family-owned cafe, a place that had once given her a sense of purpose when life seemed empty. The cafe, with its cozy atmosphere and loyal customers, had been her sanctuary, a place that had allowed her to start fresh after everything fell apart in her family. She had seen firsthand how hard the owners had worked, pouring everything they had into their business, only for it to crumble under the weight of financial mismanagement, something that Lily learned, after digging deeper, had ties to Matthew's family. Matthew had never once mentioned this. He had never opened up about the shadow of his family's wealth and influence, nor had he shared how his family had played a part in the downfall of people's lives, especially those who had done nothing but strive to succeed. The man she had come to care about, who had promised her trust and affection, had never disclosed such a significant truth about his past. Lily felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal. It wasn't just the betrayal of a man she was falling in love with. It was the betrayal of her own beliefs, the very foundation on which she had rebuilt her life. How could someone like Matthew, who had grown up with so much privilege, have any understanding of the struggles people like her faced? How could she possibly reconcile the kind, thoughtful man she knew with the shadow of his family's actions? The truth seemed too difficult to stomach. Matthew had tried to reach out to her after the discovery, his voice apologetic as he explained how he had never been directly involved with the financial decisions that led to the bankruptcy. But the damage had already been done. Lily's mind was spinning as she processed everything she had learned. She wanted to believe him, but how could she? How could she ignore the implications of what his family had done to her and countless others? It wasn't just a business failure, it was a destruction of lives, of dreams. Her dreams, too, were linked to the very people who had suffered from that bankruptcy. The emotional weight of this new truth weighed heavily on Lily's heart. She had always admired Matthew's ambition and determination. But now, every smile, every touch seemed tainted by this knowledge. The conflict within her was suffocating. Was it possible to love someone despite the sins of their past? Could she overlook Matthew's family's role in the destruction of the business she had once been a part of? Every time she looked at him, the man who had given her warmth and kindness, she now saw the shadow of the consequences of his family's greed and carelessness. For days, she kept her distance. She couldn't bring herself to talk to Matthew, and every time he reached out, she deflected. She couldn't stop asking herself the same question. Was it worth it? Was loving him worth compromising her own sense of self, her own moral compass? Was she willing to forgive something so deeply ingrained in the fabric of his life, something that was so connected to his family's power and influence? Meanwhile, Matthew had been struggling just as much. He knew he had to come clean, to explain everything, but he had no idea how to reach her. The guilt weighed heavily on him as well, not because of something he had done, but because he knew his family's actions were a part of the person he had become. He had tried to distance himself from them, to live his own life, but the sins of the past were inescapable. He had been raised in that world, surrounded by privilege, and yet, here he was facing the consequences of things that were beyond his control. The tension between them reached a breaking point when Matthew finally confronted Lily, demanding that she at least hear him out. He had been patient, giving her the space she needed, but when he saw her pulling away, he couldn't remain silent any longer. He needed her to understand that he wasn't the person she feared. He wasn't responsible for what had happened. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to explain, Lily couldn't erase the image of the small business, the people she knew, and the ruin they had faced because of the decisions made by the very family Matthew had grown up in. "I didn't ask for this," Matthew said, his voice raw with emotion. "I didn't ask for the way my family runs things. I've spent my entire life trying to make things right, but no one ever lets me forget where I came from. You think I don't know what they did? You think I haven't been trying to get out of that shadow?" Lily's eyes were filled with tears, but her voice was steady when she responded. "It's not just about your family. It's about how I feel. You've been hiding things from me, things that matter. I don't know if I can be with someone who can't be honest, even about the things that hurt." Lily's words stung, and Matthew stood frozen, caught between his love for her and the reality of the mistakes his family had made. He couldn't deny her pain, but he also couldn't deny the love that had grown between them. He didn't want to lose her, not because of something he couldn't change, but he feared that the love they shared would be torn apart by a past neither of them could rewrite. Lily knew she had to make a choice, but it wasn't easy. As much as she wanted to walk away from it all and protect herself from further heartbreak, she couldn't ignore the connection she had with Matthew. But how could she move forward knowing what she now knew about his family? How could she ignore the betrayal that ran so deep? In the end, Lily found herself standing at a crossroads. The truth about Matthew's past had shattered the world she had been carefully building, but her feelings for him remained. This was more than a test of love. It was a test of trust, of understanding, and ultimately, of forgiveness. Could she move past the damage caused by his family's actions? Could she learn to accept Matthew for who he truly was, despite the past that haunted him? As the silence between them grew, Lily knew that her decision would shape not only the future of their relationship, but also the path she would take in reconciling her own beliefs with the reality of the world she now found herself in. Would she choose love, or would she let the ghosts of the past destroy everything she had worked so hard to build? The choice wasn't easy, but it was the one that would define their future. The conflict and the choice. Lily stood at the crossroads of her life. Her heart ached with uncertainty, torn between two worlds that had never seemed more distant from each other. On one side, there was Matthew, the man she had come to love. On the other, there was her family, the people she had promised to protect no matter the cost. And now, with the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders, Lily had to make a choice, one that could alter everything. Matthew had always been a man of power and influence. He was used to taking charge, to controlling the world around him. But everything had changed when a lawsuit was filed against him and his company, and Matthew found himself at the center of a scandal that threatened to destroy everything he had worked for. The case involved the very business that had caused the downfall of Lily's family years ago, a small company that had been crushed under the weight of Matthew's family's financial dealings. The knowledge of this connection sent shockwaves through Lily's heart. How could the man she had come to love be tied to the very thing that had destroyed her family? How could she reconcile her feelings for him with the betrayal she now felt? The lawsuit was a nightmare. Matthew was fighting for his company's survival, and the legal battle was taking a toll on him. He turned to Lily for support, knowing that, as a key figure in the case, she might be called as a witness. The possibility that Lily could be forced to testify against him made the situation even more complicated. What was she supposed to do? Would she stand by the man she loved, knowing what his family's actions had cost her? Or would she protect her own blood, her family's legacy, even if it meant losing Matthew? Lily's internal battle raged within her. She was torn between love and loyalty, between the man who had shown her tenderness and affection and the family she had sworn to protect. The weight of the decision was almost unbearable. If she chose Matthew, would she be betraying her family? Could she live with the guilt of supporting the man whose actions had contributed to her family's suffering? Or if she chose her family, would she be walking away from the only man who had ever made her feel truly seen and cared for? Her thoughts swirled with confusion and doubt. On one hand, she knew that Matthew had been a good person to her, that he had been kind and understanding in ways that no one else had. He had shown her a life she never thought she deserved, offering her hope and love in a way that felt like a dream come true. Yet, deep down, Lily knew that her family's pain was real. Her father's business had collapsed under the weight of financial mismanagement, and her mother had worked herself to the bone to try and keep things afloat. The scars of that failure still lingered in their lives, a constant reminder of what they had lost. The lawsuit, and its connection to Matthew's family, reopened old wounds for Lily. It was hard for her to reconcile the person she had come to know and love with the man whose actions had been a catalyst for her family's downfall. She wasn't sure if it was possible to separate the two sides of him, the man who held her hand when she cried, and the businessman whose family had destroyed her family's livelihood. Could she ever forgive him for something that was beyond his control? Or would this betrayal be too much to bear? As the days passed and the legal proceedings drew closer, Lily found herself withdrawing from Matthew. She couldn't bear to look him in the eye, knowing the truth about his family's role in her family's misery. Yet, every time they were together, he seemed oblivious to the turmoil within her. He continued to lean on her for support, asking her to stand by him during the trial, despite knowing how deeply conflicted she was. It seemed as though he took her presence for granted, expecting her to be there for him without truly understanding the pain his family had caused her. Lily tried to push aside her feelings of guilt and betrayal. She told herself that she had to focus on the bigger picture, that this lawsuit wasn't about her, but about Matthew's future. She couldn't let her personal feelings cloud her judgment. But the more she thought about it, the more impossible the decision became. If she testified in his favor, she would be helping him win the case, but she also knew that she would be protecting a system that had hurt her family. On the other hand, if she testified against him, she would be helping her family, but she might lose the only chance at happiness she had ever known. Her internal conflict deepened as she tried to find the right balance. She couldn't help but think of her younger brother, Oliver, who had always looked up to her as a protector and provider. If she didn't make the right decision now, how could she ever look him in the eye again? Could she live with the consequences of choosing Matthew over her family? Or would she regret turning her back on the man she loved? The more Lily thought about her family's situation, the clearer it became that her decision was never going to be easy. There was no simple answer. Her love for Matthew was genuine, but so was her loyalty to her family. She realized that, no matter what she chose, something precious would be lost. If she sided with Matthew, she might lose her family's trust, but if she sided with her family, she could lose Matthew forever. In the end, Lily knew she had to make a decision that would affect her for the rest of her life. It was no longer just about the lawsuit or the financial turmoil. It was about her heart, her future, and the woman she wanted to be. Could she find a way to be true to both her family and the man she loved? Or would she have to choose one and let the other go? The path ahead was uncertain, but Lily knew one thing for sure: this was the hardest choice she would ever have to make. And whatever decision she made, it would change everything. The question now was, which path would she choose? Would she sacrifice her love for the sake of her family? Or would she take the leap and stand by the man she had come to love, even if it meant facing the consequences of her actions? The weight of the decision was overwhelming, but Lily had no choice but to face it head on. Love tested despite the conflicts at work and within their families, Lily and Matthew's relationship gradually deepens. They begin to realize that they have developed strong feelings for each other, but this comes with its own set of challenges. The most pressing issue is the fact that they must keep their relationship a secret, which creates a sense of confusion and even doubt. Lily finds herself torn between her feelings for Matthew and the reality of the pressure surrounding their love. The secrecy creates tension, and it isn't long before Lily starts questioning whether their love can truly withstand the challenges they face. Matthew, who had always been in control of his life, now feels the weight of the secrets and lies they are forced to maintain. His public persona is one of power and success, and this affair, which was never meant to see the light of day, threatens to unravel everything he's built. While he remains committed to Lily, he starts to see how fragile their situation truly is. The fear of losing everything he has worked so hard for haunts him, but his love for Lily grows stronger, pulling him deeper into this relationship that he knows may not be sustainable in the long run. For Lily, the emotional weight is even more intense. On one hand, she has never felt such a strong connection with anyone, and Matthew is everything she has always dreamed of. But on the other hand, she can't shake the feeling that their love is somehow wrong. She comes from humble beginnings, and while Matthew offers her everything she could ever want, she starts to wonder if their love is worth the sacrifice. Her family still depends on her, and she's uncertain whether she can continue to be the person who juggles all the roles she has in her life, that of a caregiver, a lover, and a person trying to make it in a world that often feels out of reach. There is also the added complexity of their social positions. Lily, who has always worked tirelessly to build her life, now feels like an outsider in a world of wealth and privilege that Matthew represents. Despite their growing love, she struggles to feel that she belongs. The difference in their social standing creates emotional distance, and she can't help but wonder if Matthew's world, full of power, money, and status, might eventually overwhelm the simplicity of her own life. Matthew, too, feels the tension from their differences in backgrounds. While he admires Lily's spirit and her resilience, he also knows that her life is difficult in ways that he can't fully understand. It pains him to watch her struggle with the burden of secrecy and the expectations placed on her by her family. The power dynamics at play make him question whether they can ever truly be equals. He wants to help her, but he knows that by doing so, he might risk pushing her further away. His love for her is genuine, but the societal pressures they face seem insurmountable. As the weeks go by, their connection continues to grow, but the weight of secrecy only increases. They steal moments together, but they are constantly aware that they must keep their love hidden. These stolen moments are both sweet and heartbreaking. Every time they are apart, they long for the next meeting, but the fear of discovery looms large. Lily finds herself questioning how much longer they can continue this way. The constant secrecy gnaws at her, making her feel as though she is living a double life. She begins to wonder if her love for Matthew is worth the personal toll it's taking on her. The secrecy also starts to affect their work life. Matthew's colleagues begin to notice that something is off. He seems distracted, and though he is always professional, there are moments when his attention drifts. Lily, on the other hand, is finding it harder to balance her job and the emotional strain of keeping her relationship a secret. The stress begins to show on her face, and she becomes less and less capable of hiding her true feelings. At the cafe where she works, she's known for being friendly and bubbly, but now her demeanor has changed. She is quieter, more introspective. The pressure of hiding her relationship from her coworkers is taking a toll on her, and it's clear that the emotional strain is starting to seep into her professional life. Despite these challenges, Lily and Matthew continue to be drawn to each other. Their love becomes a refuge from the chaos of their lives, and they find comfort in each other's arms. But the constant tension of maintaining a secret makes every moment together feel fleeting, as though their love is destined to exist in the shadows. Matthew starts to feel the strain more deeply, questioning whether his desire for a future with Lily is worth the price they are both paying. One night, after a particularly difficult week at work, Lily meets Matthew at a small, inconspicuous cafe. She's exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and she sits across from him, her hands trembling as she wraps them around her coffee cup. Matthew looks at her with concern, his expression softening as he reaches across the table to take her hand. "We can't keep doing this, Lily," he says, his voice low and filled with uncertainty. "I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I want to be with you, but this secrecy, it's tearing us apart." Lily feels a lump form in her throat. She wants to cry, to tell him everything that's been weighing on her heart. But instead, she simply nods, unable to find the right words. "I know," she whispers. "But what else can we do? I don't know how to make this work." Their love, so deep and powerful, is now overshadowed by the reality of their situation. They both know that something has to change, but neither knows how to move forward. The emotional turmoil, the stress of their secret, and the constant question of whether they can truly make their love work begins to consume them. As they sit in the quiet cafe, their hands still intertwined, they both wonder how much longer they can keep their love hidden and whether they are strong enough to face the inevitable challenges ahead. Love, they both realize, is not enough to overcome the weight of secrecy and societal expectations. But still, they continue to fight for each other, unsure of what the future holds, but unwilling to give up. The question remains, can love truly conquer all, or will the pressure of their situation drive them apart? The unexpected event the day Lily had been dreading finally arrived. It wasn't the kind of event she had ever expected, nor could she have prepared for it. It happened so suddenly, with no warning, and before she even had time to react, her world was turned upside down. As a barista working long shifts in the bustling cafe, Lily had learned to manage stress, juggle multiple orders, and stay on top of everything. But that morning, the cafe had been unusually packed, and the pressure was mounting. The noise from the espresso machines, the chatter of customers, and the clinking of glasses filled the air. She was barely keeping up, rushing from one task to the next. Then it happened. A sudden crash echoed through the cafe, followed by a scream. A tray, loaded with coffee cups, slipped from Lily's hands as she turned towards the commotion. She didn't know what had happened at first, but when she rushed to the back, her heart dropped. A group of customers had accidentally bumped into each other, causing a cascade of trays and dishes to crash onto the floor. One of the glass jars shattered, sending sharp pieces of glass everywhere. Lily immediately ran to help, trying to keep everything under control, but in her haste, she slipped on a spilled drink, tumbling to the ground with a sharp thud. Pain shot through her ankle as she cried out, her hand instinctively clutching her leg. Panic spread quickly among the customers and the staff, with several people trying to rush to her aid. But it wasn't until Matthew arrived that the chaos truly began to settle. Matthew had been passing by the cafe when he heard the commotion. Without hesitation, he rushed inside, his eyes scanning the room for Lily. He saw her lying on the floor, a look of distress on her face. He pushed past the crowd, kneeling beside her, and gently took her hand. "Lily, are you all right?" His voice was filled with concern. Lily looked up at him, blinking back tears, feeling a wave of gratitude and panic wash over her. "I'm fine," she tried to say, but the words didn't come out right. The pain in her ankle was excruciating, and she struggled to stand. Without a word, Matthew carefully lifted her into his arms, his strength surprising her. "I'm taking you to the hospital," he said firmly, making it clear that there was no argument. His protective instinct kicked in as he carried her out of the cafe, completely ignoring the concerned looks from the staff and customers. The hospital was a blur of white walls, the sterile smell of antiseptic, and the sounds of beeping monitors. As Lily sat in the waiting room, she felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. Her family was already under financial strain, and now, with the cafe incident, she feared the consequences. Matthew remained by her side the entire time, never leaving her alone. His presence was a comfort, but it also made Lily realize something she had been avoiding for so long. She had begun to rely on him. When the doctor arrived to examine her ankle, they determined that it wasn't broken, but she would need some time to rest and recover. Matthew, not satisfied with the situation, insisted that she stay with him for a while to recuperate. Lily hesitated, the familiar sense of independence kicking in, but she knew deep down that she couldn't refuse. She needed help, and Matthew was there for her, just as he had always been. As they left the hospital together, Lily couldn't help but feel the shift in their relationship. Before the accident, she had been hesitant to admit how deeply she cared for Matthew. But now, in the quiet moments between her pain and his reassurance, she realized just how much he meant to her. The thought of being without him, of facing the struggles of her life alone, seemed unbearable. Matthew's protective nature had always been a part of him, but it was in that moment, as he helped her recover from the accident, that Lily understood the depth of his feelings. He wasn't just offering his help out of obligation. He cared about her deeply. The vulnerability she felt was a wake-up call, and it forced her to confront the fact that her heart had already made its choice. Over the next few days, as Lily stayed at Matthew's apartment to rest, she found herself reflecting on everything that had led them here. Their relationship had started with a chance encounter, a collision of worlds that neither had expected. Now, it had become something more. Matthew's presence was a constant reminder that love, in all its forms, was a force that couldn't be ignored. It had the power to heal, to protect, and to change lives. As Lily lay in bed one evening, looking out at the city skyline from Matthew's apartment, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. For the first time in a long while, she felt like everything might be okay. The accident had forced her to face the truth about her feelings, and now there was no turning back. Matthew's quiet voice interrupted her thoughts. "You know, I'll always be here for you, no matter what." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that spoke volumes. Lily turned to him, meeting his gaze, and for the first time, she felt the full force of the connection between them. "I know," she whispered, her heart beating faster than before. In that moment, everything changed. The pain from her ankle, the uncertainty about her future, and the complications in her life all seemed to fade into the background. All that mattered was the fact that she wasn't alone anymore. And that realization, that Matthew would always be there for her, gave her the strength to face whatever came next. This unexpected event marked a turning point in their relationship. It was no longer just about the attraction they had felt for each other. It was about something deeper, something that neither of them had fully understood until now. Their love had been tested, and it had proven itself to be resilient, even in the face of the unexpected. As they spent more time together, Matthew and Lily knew that their journey was just beginning. The obstacles they had faced had only strengthened their bond, and now, with every passing day, they grew closer. It wasn't just the accident that had brought them together. It was the undeniable truth that they were meant to be in each other's lives. They had faced the unexpected, and they had come out stronger on the other side. In the end, it wasn't just the accident that changed everything. It was the love that had been growing between them all along. A love that had survived the test of time, the pressure of life's challenges, and the sudden twists of fate. It was love that had transformed both of them in ways they never could have imagined before that fateful day. Matthew and Lily were no longer two people living separate lives. They were partners, bound together by their shared experiences and their unwavering love for each other. The accident had been a test, but their love had passed with flying colors. And now, nothing could tear them apart. The crucial decision, Lily Morgan stood at a crossroads in her life. The weight of the world seemed to rest on her shoulders, pressing her to make a decision that could change everything. She had been caught between two worlds for months, her growing, undeniable love for Matthew Carter, the man who had entered her life so unexpectedly, and the responsibilities she had to her family and career. Now, it was time for her to face a decision that would determine the course of her future. Lily had never been one to back down from challenges, but this time felt different. The conflict within her was like an ever-tightening knot, one she couldn't untangle no matter how hard she tried. On one side, there was Matthew, kind, supportive, and someone who made her feel understood in ways no one ever had before. But on the other, there was her family, her sense of duty to her younger brother, Oliver, who was still recovering from his illness, and her work at the small cafe, which she had worked so hard to maintain. The love she shared with Matthew was undeniable. But Lily had always been independent, someone who had prided herself on taking care of things on her own. The thought of asking for help, of allowing someone else, especially someone as wealthy as Matthew, to step in and take the reins, felt like a betrayal of everything she had worked so hard to build. Could she allow herself to lean on him without feeling guilty? Could she put her trust in a man who lived in a world so different from hers? Yet, at the same time, Lily found herself yearning for something more than just survival. The small victories in her life no longer seemed to satisfy her. She was starting to crave a future that held more meaning, more joy. But could she have both? Could she hold on to her independence and her love for Matthew without losing herself in the process? Matthew had been nothing but patient with her. He had been understanding of her need for space, her reluctance to accept his help, and yet he never pushed her. He was always there when she needed him, supporting her from the shadows, never demanding anything in return. But the closer they got, the more difficult it became for her to remain at a distance. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, the way he made her feel seen and valued. But she also couldn't ignore the nagging fear that she was losing control, that she was letting someone else take over parts of her life that she wasn't ready to give up. The decision Lily faced wasn't just about choosing Matthew over her family or career. It was about finding a balance between the two and reconciling her love for him with the woman she had worked so hard to become. She knew that love wasn't about sacrifice, but about compromise. Could she build a life with him without losing herself in the process? As the days passed, Lily began to understand that the real struggle wasn't choosing one path over the other. It was about accepting that life was full of uncertainty. And sometimes, the right decision wasn't the one that felt easiest or most comfortable. It was the one that challenged her to grow, to learn how to trust, and to allow herself the freedom to love without fear. She found herself thinking about her own mother, who had spent so much of her life giving to others without asking for anything in return. But Lily also remembered the sacrifices her mother had made, the way she had placed her family above her own happiness, and how it had ultimately taken a toll on her. Lily didn't want to follow that same path. She didn't want to sacrifice herself for the sake of others. But she also didn't want to push away the one person who had brought light into her life, someone who saw her for who she truly was, not just the woman who worked tirelessly to survive. With each passing day, the weight of the decision grew heavier, but so did the clarity. Lily realized that she didn't have to choose one or the other. She could have both. She could have her independence, her family, and her love for Matthew. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be perfect, but it was possible. And for the first time in a long time, Lily felt a sense of peace settle over her. She didn't have to have all the answers right away, but she could make a decision that honored both her love for Matthew and her sense of self. As the moment approached when she would have to speak with him, Lily felt the uncertainty wash away, replaced by a quiet confidence. She was ready to take the next step, whatever it might be. She no longer feared the possibility of losing herself. Instead, she embraced the idea that love, real love, wasn't about sacrificing who you were. It was about growing together, finding strength in each other's vulnerabilities, and supporting one another through life's ups and downs. This decision wasn't just about her love for Matthew. It was about her love for herself, her family, and her future. It was about finding harmony in her heart and learning to trust that the right choices would come when the time was right. Lily stood by the window of her apartment, her mind in a storm of conflicting thoughts. The past few weeks had felt like an emotional roller coaster. Her relationship with Matthew had deepened in ways she hadn't expected, but so had the weight of the secrets and decisions that loomed over them. The truth was now impossible to ignore, and as the reality of what they had to confront sank in, Lily knew that things could never go back to the way they were. Matthew stood across from her, his hands resting on the kitchen counter, the air thick with silence between them. The vulnerability in his eyes made it clear that he was struggling, just as much as she was, to navigate the complexities of their relationship. His past, the choices he made, and the secrets he kept were now on the verge of coming to light. And Lily had her own truths to reveal as well. The past few months had been a whirlwind. Matthew had become more than just a man she admired from afar. He had become her partner, her confidant. But now, standing on the edge of the unknown, the future seemed like a darkened road. Could they continue down this path together? Or had the weight of their past choices already driven a wedge between them? Lily turned to Matthew, her heart heavy with a mixture of love and apprehension. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor inside her. Matthew took a deep breath, his expression unreadable. "I know," he replied quietly. "I've been avoiding it, but we can't anymore." She walked closer to him, the distance between them narrowing as her hand reached for his. "The truth, both of our truths, it's the only way forward. I don't want us to keep hiding from it. We have to face what's been left unsaid." Matthew nodded slowly, a flicker of guilt passing through his eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you, Lily, but I've been keeping things from you, things that could destroy us if we don't confront them." Lily's heart skipped a beat. "What is it? What are you hiding from me?" There was a long pause. Matthew took her hand, his fingers trembling slightly. "There's a part of my past I haven't told you about. My family, what they did to your father's business. It's something I should have told you, but I didn't. I didn't think I was ready to face the consequences." The words hit Lily like a punch to the gut. She had suspected there was more to Matthew's family than he had let on, but hearing it from his own lips was something she hadn't been prepared for. The betrayal stung, but it wasn't just the business that hurt. It was the feeling that Matthew had kept such a monumental secret from her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the betrayal and confusion seeping through her words. Matthew closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering the strength to face her. "I didn't want to lose you, Lily. I thought if you knew, you'd leave me. My family's wealth, the business deals, they've caused so much damage over the years. I didn't want you to see me as just another piece of that mess." Lily felt a knot form in her chest. Her love for Matthew had been growing every day, but now the shadows of his past were threatening to swallow the future they had been building together. She felt torn between the man she loved and the man who had been complicit in hurting her family. It was a cruel irony. Matthew had become her source of support, yet he was also tied to the very thing that had brought her family to the brink of financial ruin. But as she stood there, staring into his eyes, something in her softened. She had to face the truth just as Matthew had. They both had skeletons in their closets, but that didn't have to mean the end of their relationship. It could be the beginning of something stronger, built on honesty and trust. Lily took a deep breath, the words that came next feeling like both a relief and a burden. "I've been hiding something from you too," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "My father, he never told you the full story about why his business went under. It wasn't just the economy or bad luck. There were choices made, things done behind closed doors. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want to lose you either." Matthew looked at her, his brow furrowing as he processed her words. "What do you mean? What happened?" Lily swallowed hard. "It's my family's mistake. They borrowed money from your father's company, but they never had the means to pay it back. When the crash happened, they lost everything, and we never spoke about it. I thought if I told you, it would change how you saw me. But I was wrong." The silence between them stretched, each of them coming to terms with the weight of their confessions. Matthew's hand tightened around hers, the remorse in his eyes deepening. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said softly. "I should have told you. I should have been honest from the start. I didn't know about your family struggles, and I'm ashamed that I've kept this from you." Lily nodded, her heart aching but somehow lighter. "We both have our secrets, Matthew, but we can't keep them buried anymore. We have to face the truth together, no matter how hard it is." As the words hung in the air, Lily realized that the foundation of their relationship had shifted. It wasn't built on idealized love or perfect moments. It was built on vulnerability, honesty, and the willingness to confront the darkness of their pasts. They had to let go of the lies that had kept them apart and learn to trust each other in ways they hadn't before. Matthew stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. "Do you think we can move past this, Lily? Can we rebuild what we've lost?" Lily took a step back, her heart torn, but her mind clear. "I don't know, Matthew, but I know that I'm willing to try." The journey ahead was uncertain. The road to healing wasn't going to be easy, and the truth had already done its damage. But Lily also knew that it was only by confronting their past that they could build a future together. The challenges they faced were just beginning, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. A hope that, despite everything, they could still make it work. As they stood there, facing each other, the weight of their past in the air between them, Lily knew that the next step was up to both of them. They had to choose, together, whether they could forgive, forget, and build something stronger from the ashes of their secrets. The truth, after all, was the only way forward. A new beginning. Lily stood at the threshold of her future, looking out at the horizon with a sense of quiet anticipation. The past months had been an emotional roller coaster, filled with struggles, heartbreak, and tough decisions. But as she looked at Matthew standing beside her, she felt a sense of peace settling into her heart. They had come a long way since that fateful first encounter. They had both faced their fears, confronted the truths of their pasts, and made difficult decisions to be together. And now, standing here, they both knew that although the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, they were ready to face whatever came their way together. Matthew stood with her, his hand resting gently on her back. His touch was reassuring, a steady presence in the midst of all the chaos they had both experienced. "We've made it through the hardest parts," he said softly, his voice full of hope. Lily nodded, a small, contented smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "We have," she agreed. "But it's just the beginning, isn't it?" She looked at him, her eyes filled with both love and uncertainty. There was still a part of her that wondered if they could truly make it, if their love could survive the obstacles life would inevitably throw their way. They had both faced so much already: his family's pressure, her own internal struggles, the financial pressures, the lies, the betrayals, and the long hours they had spent apart. It was enough to break most relationships. Yet here they were, still standing, still fighting for each other. Matthew seemed to sense the uncertainty in her eyes. He stepped closer, closing the gap between them, and lifted her chin gently, guiding her to look at him fully. "I know it's scary. I know we both have our fears. But, Lily, there's nothing more important to me than being with you, building something real, something lasting." His voice was filled with conviction, and Lily's heart swelled at the sincerity in his words. For so long, she had doubted herself and the love they shared. She had worried that she wasn't good enough for someone like him, that her past would always haunt her and create an insurmountable wall between them. But now, standing here with him, she realized that love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about being willing to fight for what mattered, to stand by each other even when the world felt uncertain. And that was what Matthew had done for her. He had shown her that love wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't easy, it wasn't perfect, but it was worth fighting for. They had their share of secrets, their share of mistakes, but together, they had learned to trust one another. Lily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past begin to lift off her shoulders. She didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to have everything figured out. All she needed was this moment, this new beginning with Matthew by her side. "There's still so much we have to face," she whispered. "But I know now that we can face it together." Matthew smiled warmly, his thumb brushing against her cheek. "We will. No matter what happens, we'll do it together. I'm not going anywhere." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lily felt a sense of peace wash over her. The future still seemed daunting, still held its share of unknowns, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face it. She had Matthew, and together they would find their way. Their love wasn't a simple story with an easy ending. It wasn't one that could be wrapped up neatly with a bow, but that was what made it real. Their love had been forged in the fires of hardship, trust, and sacrifice. And now, it was stronger than ever. Lily looked up at Matthew, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and hope. "I'm ready," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Matthew leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Me too." As they walked hand in hand, stepping into the unknown future, Lily knew that, no matter what happened, they would face it together. And that was enough. This was their new beginning. The past was behind them, and the future was filled with endless possibilities. The only thing that mattered now was the love they had for each other and the life they would build together. Thank you for watching. We hope this story touched your heart. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and subscribe to Stories TH for more emotional stories. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.